Hi everyone, my name is Alex, and welcome to the 4th episode of Eagle Spirit Science Futures, where science doesn't just apply to the classroom. In this episode, we're going to learn about canoes and how buoyancy allows for them to travel the waters. When we think of canoes in a modern context, we think of calm strolls in the lake, weekend trips through the rivers, and overall opportunities to disconnect from the bustling world around us. Be that as it may, canoes have served many indigenous peoples as a means to navigate their unique territories. Before Europeans brought over horses and wheeled vehicles, my ancestors were using canoes made of birch bark as a means of travel. A traditional birch bark canoe was large enough to fit an entire family and their belongings, but light enough to be lifted over one's shoulder. When European settlers had seen how light and efficient these canoes were, it very quickly became their preferred method of travel, as their sailboats could not navigate the narrow waterways found across Turtle Island. The art of traditional canoe making is not commonly practiced today, but there are still those out there who are preserving the tradition today. The process is very much an art form, and an excellent example of the levels of engineering that exist in our culture. When we look at the science behind how something floats on water, we get a better understanding of why our ancestors chose to use the vessels that they had. Let's explore that. The first thing that we need to speak about is something called buoyancy. Before we get into that, I'm going to show you something to help me in explaining this. I have here a bowl filled with tap water and an orange. I'm going to put the orange in the water, and I want you to make a guess on whether it will sink or float. Pause the video if you want to discuss this with someone. As you can see, the orange floats. Now before we talk about why, I'm going to peel it and try the same thing. What do you think will happen this time? Go ahead, take some time and discuss this. Unlike last time, the orange sinks to the bottom of the bowl. This is buoyancy at work. Buoyancy, in simplest terms, is a force that is applied to an object that is partially or completely immersed in fluid, like water. This buoyant force acts upward and goes against the force of gravity, which we feel as a downward force. The force of buoyancy is caused by differences in pressure on two sides of an object, the side that is immersed in fluid and the side that is not. For the unpeeled orange, there are pores all over the peeling and air pockets on the inside. This means that there is a pressure difference between the outside of the orange and inside, increasing buoyancy and causing it to float. The reason why the orange sinks when we peel it is because we are increasing something called density. Density is a word that we use to describe the amount of matter in an object, or its mass, compared to how much space it takes up, also known as volume. For example, the density of water is 1 gram per centimeter cubed, or just remember 1. Going back to our unpeeled orange, there's more air inside of it because of the peeling. This means that it takes up a lot more space than the peeled orange. So, the unpeeled orange floats because it has a density lower than water, remember which is 1, and the peeled orange has a higher density than water, or greater than 1. In these experiments, we're going to be making rafts out of everyday materials and testing their buoyancy. Let's take a look at what we'll need for this experiment. You'll need a large bowl or container. You'll need some tin foil, something like coins, something uniform at least, like marbles would even work, or some bolts. And finally, if you have it, a kitchen scale that can measure grams. So for the first part of this experiment, we're going to be building canoes out of tin foil. Here, I have a single sheet, and what I'm doing is I'm folding the edges together towards the center just to help build the shape. There's no real wrong or right way of doing this, so long as you make sure that the edges keep the water from entering the canoe. Try out different shapes here. See what you can come up with. In our experiment, we're going to be testing the buoyancy of 3 different types of canoes. We have one that is quite long, something that's a little bit more in the medium range, and we have a short boat as well. Try to vary yours as much as possible, and don't be afraid to add extra material to some of them. Now we're going to test the buoyancy of our canoes. So you're going to take your plastic container and fill it up with water. From here, you're going to take your canoe and plop it in. Make sure there's no holes to make sure that the water keeps on the outside until it sinks. Now with that kitchen scale that we spoke about earlier, we're going to measure how much each coin weighs. For us, the quarter weighs about 4 grams. Now, we're going to add those quarters in one by one, and we're going to see how many quarters it takes to make the boat sink into the water. For this canoe, it started to sink once we put about 20 coins into it. Repeat this for your 2 other canoes that you've made. So after testing the 3 boats, here are our results. The small canoe was able to hold about 9 different coins, the medium canoe held about 20, and finally the large canoe held about 26. We have the mass that they were able to hold in there as well, but as you can see, the large canoe was able to hold the most number of coins, and therefore the largest amount of mass as well. So in summary, our largest and longest canoe was able to hold the most amount of coins while still staying buoyant. Something that we haven't explored in this video, but encourage you to do so, is to use fluids with different densities to water. Some household examples of this include cooking oil, sugar or salt water, and even syrup. Use the same boats you made for this experiment, and check if there are any differences in the amount of coins you can put into your boat before it sinks. How do you think this affects the buoyancy as well? Whenever I get to visit home, the first thing that I look forward to is seeing the water that runs along the length of my community. On my most recent trip, I had the opportunity of visiting our community gospom, or lake. A childhood friend offered me the chance to go out into the water using his canoe, and it was honestly one of my favorite moments of my time spent back home. It's at these moments, when I'm in the very same waters that my ancestors once traversed, I feel grounded and more connected with my Mi'kmaq identity. Having access to the waters in my territory is something that is integral to my well-being and sense of self. However, we are beginning to see current and future challenges arise as bodies of water are being affected by climate change. In this lab, we left you with the idea of using different fluids with different densities and seeing how that affects the buoyancy of your boats. Our rivers, lakes, and waters are currently seeing changes in their densities, but also their temperatures and even pH. This all means that the habitat of some of the animals and fish that we rely on as traditional foods may not be able to be hospitable in the near future. We face a unique challenge as Indigenous peoples, as this will affect how we practice our cultures out on the land. The more we can understand these changes, the better we can help to change our own lifestyles and ensure that the generations to come will be able to access their culture as we do now. Thank you so much for watching the last video of our Eagle Spirit Science Future series. If this is your first time watching us, we have 3 other science videos in this series posted on our Facebook page. For those of you who have kept up with us throughout the series, we want to personally thank you for taking an interest in our very small project. It was honestly a blast to create these, and for the young scientists tuning in, I want to leave you with a message. Science can sometimes seem like it's all about tests and grades. Sometimes the topics are really hard to grasp, and I can speak from my own experience. when I say that sometimes that can be very discouraging. What I want to share with you is that science has always been a part of our culture since the days of our ancestors. They lived and breathed the science of the land, and the culture that we have inherited from them reflects the science that they once lived. We receive this knowledge from our elders and become connected with our ancestors in the process. So don't be discouraged next time you're having a bit of trouble in the classroom. Science is a part of who you are, and just like our ancestors, you will figure it out.